There's clearly a way where the U.S. government could say, you know what, we're going to transition to Bitcoin and we're just going to phase out the U.S. dollar. Obviously, Bitcoin would have been far better if you just had, a Bitcoin per block forever. I mean, that's a much cleaner way of this 21 million nonsense.
No doubt, no doubt.
There'd be idiots who just go far down one path of ideology that they just have no perspective on how the world actually works.
What's our podcast name?
It's a Blockchain Jungle Peter Todd podcast 2025.
The BJ podcast. Super excited. I think this is a crazy opportunity live from Blockchain Jungle 2025. Felipe, Juan, my co-founders, we have the pleasure of having Peter Todd, the star of the event. How's it been? How do you like Costa Rica so far?
I mean, I can't really say much given all I've done is go from the hotel, walked the 800 meters to the conference, and walked back, occasionally going to an Argentinian steakhouse in between.
And now tomorrow you fly out, right?
Fly out, yep. I've been to Costa Rica before and went off to the jungle and all that. But yeah, this time I'm going to see basically nothing.
Peter, this is a super exciting interview for us. You know, we're crypto fanatics. We've been around. We have different expertises. Feli is deep in crypto investment, asset, wealth management. Juan, everything, literally growth, massive conferences on my side, development, open source, community building. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Feli, I think you have some pressing questions right on the top of your mind that I know you've been building.
Yeah, I've been thinking about many questions since I realized that we were having a podcast some hours ago because, I mean, your IQ is way too high, you know, so that's challenging for the questions that we're about to ask. So I want to break the ice.
Hey, answering dumb questions is hard too.
So I wanted to break the ice and get the tech part of Bitcoin aside and get to know a little bit about Todd and how you got involved into all the decentralized movement back in the day. At what age? Where does your passion comes from?
Well, I mean, if you're really talking back in the day, you go all the way back to like high school.
Yeah.
When I had my mandatory high school high school civics class, right? Which, of course, you know, being a proper high school civics class is all about your freedoms and democracy and all this freedom of speech. I might be showing my age a little here, but you know, clearly like a good Canadian, I thought those were all good values, and I got interested in this thing called the Freenet project, which was decentralized data publishing, censorship resistant. It was basically a way of, roughly speaking, creating a web page so anyone could go read it and there wasn't reliant on central servers. And I realized very early on, well, I mean, obviously decentralized publishing is all well and good, but if you don't have money, you can't really do politics. And clearly in the future, money is getting more and more centralized. I mean, even back then, you know, credit cards were already quite a thing.
Yeah.
And of course, I was interested, well, how would we make decentralized money? And eventually I wound up with something called the Blue Sky mailing list, with like Adam Back and Hal Finney. And as far as I know, we all failed to invent Bitcoin. We tried hard.
That was Blue Sky, you said?
Yeah, Blue Sky mailing list.
Is that different to the cryptography
Yes,
mailing
very
list?
different, yeah.
What's
completely
the difference
different thing
between them?
I mean, it's just not the same thing. It's just another mailing list, yeah.
Okay.
But basically, a bunch of
Which
people...
one was gooder?
Well, basically a bunch of people from from around Freenet got interested in this, and I was just one of the many people who were posting stuff on there. And like I say, you know, we did try to go and invent Bitcoin, and we all failed, as far as I know.
What was the name of the project at that time that you tried to?
Well, I mean, it was just people talking on a mailing list, like thinking of ideas and so on.
And when was the first time your first interaction with real Bitcoin code? You remember that day, or at least that?
I mean, I don't clearly remember it. Like, what I do remember is, of course, you know, so I think it was around 2000, late 2009, maybe early 2010.
Wow.
I finally read the white paper, and honestly, my reaction to this was, shit, I should have thought of that. It's just so obvious it could work. And then after that, I mean, I was quite busy at the time with school and work, but after that, I wound up at some point getting the source code and just reading it. And if I remember correctly, it was for like a few, weekend or two. I sat down with the source code and a pen and paper and just studied it. So I figured, all right, well, what does what? In particular, I followed what actually happens when a block is accepted. Okay. That's the consensus.
Yeah, the consensus mechanism.
Yeah. So I just read through it line by line and figured out what it actually does. And over time, I started thinking about it more and realizing, well, there's flaws in this. And then that's when I ultimately started posting on like Bitcoin Talk mailing list, or sorry, Bitcoin Talk,
.org.
yeah, BitcoinTalk.org, the web forum.
Yeah.
And from that, eventually got into then the block size debate. And probably when I became well known in sort of that community was when I went and said Gavin Andresen was wrong and had a really good write up explaining why.
That's crazy.
So,
And
Peter, I have a question. Would you prefer that everyone normalize Bitcoin and all the story around Bitcoin and it to be more like something more normal, or do you still prefer this kind of hype and nostalgia around the story and the Bitcoin.org and the mailing list or whatever?
I don't know. Bitcoin should be normal and widely used. I mean, clearly, like that's the
But, you know,
long-term goal here.
the society and the people and even we in here in this podcast we're romanticizing a lot that
Well, I
history
mean, that's
behind
just not very productive. Like the end goal is that Bitcoin's widely used.
Yeah.
And in the future, I fully expect, I mean, let's say 10 years into the future, I fully expect Bitcoin conferences like this to be much less of a thing because Bitcoin will be boring. You'll probably have tech conferences, which will continue to be interesting, and nerds will go talk about, Lightning version 5. But
yeah,
we don't have conferences for most normal things. Only the people involved in it go to. I mean, you don't yes, you have like plumbing conferences, but plumbers go to them, not normal people.
yeah, Bitcoin is now part of the economy, and it will become
part.
Yeah, small part. Yeah, so that's great. Another question, education wise, what do you think that could happen to the civilization around the world if the education curve it doesn't get more smoother time and time, and Bitcoin, let's say it gets to $1,000,000 per unit? What do you think? Because we had a chat back in the day in El Salvador.
Well, first I got to point out, you have to be careful when you say things like $1 million per Bitcoin. Really should be talking about Big Macs per Bitcoin, because it's very easy
It's
for
not a
Bitcoin to go
forecast.
to any number in fiat.
Let's say a very high number that will get many consciousness awakened, shaken out. What do you think that could happen to the civilization if the education curve doesn't get smoother? You think people could,
Bitcoin's not that hard to use, man.
it is
I mean,
not.
I just had this discussion with someone the other day. He's saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's so hard to use." It's like, dude, when you went and learned how to drive, you actually went through a process to learn how to drive. It was a hard thing. It took some learning, or you would go kill someone, probably yourself. And like figuring out how to go write down some seed phrase and to keep that seed phrase safe is way easier than driving. I mean, let alone like all the other stuff we expect adults to do. I mean, I'm sure you know how to read. How many hours did you spend learning how to read? In comparison, learning how to store your Bitcoin is trivial. It's just something that we'll expect of normal human beings. And, the adoption curve there, in like, let's say you have a hypothetical future where the reason why Bitcoin is, 100 million per Bitcoin is because the US dollar hyperinflated.
but
Like in that world, you're just going to go figure it out as a normie because you're just going to have to. And it'll be just like any other thing we expect adults to do. It's not that hard.
yeah, we had a conversation back in El Salvador with Gabor Gurbax. You know him, right?
No.
Is the architect of the ETFs of Bitcoin, and he mentioned we asked him like, what will happen if Bitcoin goes to 1 million? So he says that Bitcoin right now is a measure of how messed is the world. So the higher the number goes,
It's got to point out, Bitcoin going to 1 million is only 10x from now.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, that's not that interesting. Bitcoin going to maybe 100 million, that would be a stronger indication something went wrong in the world.
Yeah, I have another perspective over there because he says, I remember Gabor saying this back in El Salvador. He says that Bitcoin has become an index of trust in the governments. The higher it goes, the less the people trust in their governments. What do you think about that perspective?
I don't think it's an exact index the way people think it is. So a good example being, there's been a strong argument that Trump's government would be quite happy for the US dollar to weaken.
Yeah.
Now, the US dollar weakening is not the same thing as trust in the US government weakening.
Okay.
That could just be an economic thing. One good example is being, there's clearly a way where the US government could say, you know what, we're going to transition to Bitcoin. and we're just going to phase out the US dollar. That has nothing to do with trust in the government. If anything, it might actually make trust go up.
Okay.
Because this would be the government shackling their own hands, saying, "Yeah, we cannot now just go borrow by stealing people's wealth."
They're just fixing it.
Yeah, if trust in the government would actually go up there, at least among the part of the community, part of the world that is communist.
So you are in favor of the Clarity Act coming in this December, I think, right? Clarity.
Again, what's the Clarity Act?
We've been waiting for it for, I don't know, many months already. Clarity Act is just a regulation, the market structure bill to get the.
Oh, that's the one that like legalized ETFs, right?
No, no,
or like
ETFs
sorry, not legalized. Provide a framework for like
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this framework will provide the SEC and the CEFTC.
Yeah.
Which one will be monitoring which streets, and that's the market. So,
But
what
my
do you think about
understanding
that?
is the Clarity Act is mostly about US dollar ETFs, not Bitcoin ETFs. I could be wrong on this, but my understanding was that was the main excitement about it.
Yeah, actually,
Or sorry, not US dollar ETFs, US dollar stable coins.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the Genius Act.
Yeah. Genius Act, okay.
Yeah, that's the
There's
Genius
so
Act.
many of these silly
Yeah, exactly. So there's many politics involved right now in the industry, and I have another question regarding the thing that we were chatting at our stand, and it was about getting. You said it's nonsense, but getting Bitcoin attached to real estate and to real world assets. It's better just to hold Bitcoin, but many financial
Well,
products
yeah.
will.
So those the thing about how you could potentially bundle like real estate with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And of course, my reaction to that was, well, this is just stupid. Why would you do that?
Yeah, exactly.
You're just
Just hold it.
taking two different assets, combining them for no particular reason.
Yeah. Makes no sense. Yeah. But economists and financial products will come up with something new to build up hype through the industry.
Yeah. A lot of people will try to create some scammy thing based on some more complex thing people don't understand. It'll get ripped off.
Go ahead, you're cool with the questions.
Peter, the Bitcoin landscape has evolved, definitely. You just mentioned scams. I mean, I know you've written a bunch of papers on these different layer 2 Bitcoin approaches, some aiming for native, L2 Bitcoins, trying to modify the Bitcoin script. What's your general take on it? Should the Bitcoin script adapt, evolve? Should it stay as is? What's your take on it?
I mean, I've proposed an opcode in the past, and that got accepted. Check lockdown verify, and I more recently proposed another one, op expire. So clearly, I'm on the side of surely we could add more things to Bitcoin script, and I don't I don't think that's an interesting question in general, because clearly the answer is hypothetically yes. We could come up with new opcodes which would be useful for Bitcoin. The better thing to ask is the details of what exactly are you talking about. And in my big L2 covenants dependent L2 protocols paper, I basically made the point that there isn't a rush to do any of this stuff immediately, and there are a bunch of different trade-offs. And the most important thing to do immediately is probably to do the, great consensus cleanup, as we call it, which is just fix a bunch of issues in the consensus protocol. Things like how in version 0 scripting, what Satoshi made, there's ways to create transactions that are just strictly speaking a DOS attack. And I don't mean like in the silly sense of, allows JPEGs on the chain. I mean, you can construct a transaction that your node is going to take dozens of seconds to validate. That's clearly a bad thing. I mean, potentially minutes even, depending on how well you construct it. Like, that's clearly a bad thing. We should go fix this.
When proposing and pushing for a new opcode, like who are the biggest voices right now that matter to actually get behind it?
There isn't an easy answer to that, because it depends on the circumstances. I mean, hypothetically, let's suppose I was to go push for op expire. The way I would have to go do that is, first of all, get more people interested in actually using it. That would probably, in the moment, that would probably mean going to like Lightning implementations and convincing them that opcode would be useful for future versions of Lightning. It would also mean probably going to things like auction protocols and convincing them that it would be useful, and then getting the feedback between, what exactly do you need it to do to be useful? And of course, at some point you go write a standard for what you're actually proposing to go change, write some code. And then beyond that, I mean, it all kind of gets fuzzy. Yeah. Like a lot of this stuff really gets down to going to conferences and giving presentations and arguing it's a good idea. And at some point you build enough mind share that people think it's a good idea. They can propose a deployment plan, which in the best case is something really boring. Like clearly everyone wants this. Let's just turn it on by having the hash power also say they want it and we're good to go. Of course, if it's more controversial, then kind of all bets go out the window.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, if you're talking about, say, check template verify, just give an example, which potentially useful for a bunch of L2s. How we actually get there, it's just not clear at the moment. And part of why it's not clear is because of the so-called Nazis going and pushing their own Rush soft fork and like cluttering up all this technical documentation, like all this technical discussion, and basically taking the oxygen out of the room, where people are going to argue about this stupid thing rather than something more useful.
Very interesting. How often are you coding nowadays? Has AI changed your workflows?
No, it's completely useless.
Completely useless.
For the programming I do, AI is completely useless to actually write the code because the things I do tend to be novel. You know, stuff that like nothing quite like it has ever been done, and the AI just doesn't have its training data. And the way I put this AI is say, AI currently is a search engine. It's a very, very good search engine, but it is fundamentally a search engine. If you ask it a question that's not in its training data, more likely than not, it's going to fail. Now, it often looks like it's very smart because its training data is absolutely enormous. And if you're doing something that a lot of people have done, I mean, every single permutation of it is going to be in that training data, can spit it back at you. But if you're doing something novel, it just totally falls over. Now, to answer the second part of your question, on occasion, but my favorite way of programming, if you will, is to like go on podcasts, convince people to do things.
Do you think that vibe coding has a similar ethos to Bitcoin?
No. No. Bitcoin at the technical level is this very high-end form of programming. It's very, very high stakes. Things need to go work extremely well. You have to really, truly understand what it's doing. Under those circumstances, AI just doesn't help. A particularly extreme example of this was the soft fork I proposed and got implemented years ago, check lock time verify. The lines of code of check lock time verify was roughly like 5 lines of code. Maybe 50 lines of comments, like 500 lines of unit tests.
It was ultra simple.
Yeah, it was incredibly simple. AI is not going to help you write 5 lines of code. That's like actually typing those lines was like the least complex part of this whole process. Now, there's other types of programming where you're doing things that are similar to other things, and so-called vibe coding can go help things. But it's a real trap in Bitcoin land where if you screw up, people lose money.
I have another question for you. Turning a little bit away from tech and code. 140 and block rewards are gone. 21 million Bitcoin has been mined, and miners can only be rewarded by transactions fees. What do you think it will happen at that time? We will not be alive, I know, but
You're focusing on the wrong date.
okay.
Right? You're thinking in terms of when the last Satoshi is going to be mined.
Yeah.
That's not what matters. What matters is when the overall monetary inflation rate is low enough that it becomes insignificant. And that happens long before the last Satoshi gets mined.
Wow. Okay. Now, I think I'm done with my question, sir. You have one?
Yeah, I don't think you want the answer to this. Obviously, Bitcoin would have been far better if
Yeah,
we just had,
of course.
a Bitcoin per block forever. I mean, that's a much cleaner way
Yeah.
of this 21 million nonsense.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. You have more questions?
Let's just wrap up right here. But I do have a last question. Do you think it's important for people to map out their ideology? And do you have like a tag, or do you even care about like putting a tag on your ideology and raising your hand and say like, no, I define myself as a crypto anarchist or anarcho-capitalist or something like that? Do you care about it, or do you think that's important for the consciousness and for the people?
I want to say that's important, but the problem with that is so many people who I hear really call themselves like crypto anarchists or, hard L libertarians and all this, they tend to be idiots.
They use WhatsApp.
Well, they tend to be idiots who just go far down one path of ideology that they just have no perspective on how the world actually works. And an example of this is I keep on seeing people have this sort of cypherpunk right code ideology. They do not want to get involved in politics at all. And the irony of this is the term cypherpunk really came to prominence during the PGP wars when the US government basically wanted to outlaw encryption. And those cypherpunks, yes, they wrote PGP. Yes, they went and did stunts like putting RSA encryption code on T-shirts, much like this stunt here. But the important thing is what they were doing was not just writing code, it was politics. That stunt of putting RSA encryption code on a T-shirt, that was playing politics. The goal of that was not that people would go sit there in a T-shirt and type down that code and use it. It was so that they could make a political point that outlawing encryption is stupid.
Yeah, it was movement.
Yeah. Where the current set of Bitcoiners, you tell them, hey, maybe we should do some politics. Their reflexive action, oh, that's all bullshit. Why would you ever do anything politically? Governments are stupid.
Irony.
It's like, dude, they're way stronger than you really want them to be, and you are not going to resist government forever by just writing code.
I have some more questions. So going back in time, you said about cypherpunks. So going back to the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto was written by Timothy C. May. What do you think about those thoughts he had back in the 80s? He put it down in that piece of paper. That
It's a stupid manifesto because it's not playing politics.
It's not playing politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, someone writing their fantasy about like what cryptography could be. But the problem with that is cryptography runs on computers, and computers ultimately involve economic supply chains that governments can go strangle. And this fundamental assumption of, we're always going to have access to computers when we write code is just wrong. And that's why you do have to play politics. You do have to make sure that the laws are free enough that you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, free market. And what do you think about eCash and David Chow making his first contributions to the industry? We were about to have him here.
eCash was pretty cool, but it is one of those things where it's very sad that it wound up failing. And when there's good arguments that the reason it failed is ultimately they were too greedy, and they apparently back in the day Microsoft was going to put eCash into Windows.
Yeah,
and they tried to get too much money out of them. Microsoft quit,
and banks too.
Well, I mean, that'd be like the second part. But in a different world, they would have pushed this much more heavily. And then the political framework would have been, well, eCash does exist. And it would be much harder to then go put regulations on peer-to-peer money transfer. Now, you look at what's coming down the European Union, they want to make full AML KYC mandatory for all crypto transactions.
Wow.
And that's going to come in like 2027.
Back in the day, cryptographers were considered threats for the government, and they were chased by the government, right? What any type of experience that you had back in the day, or have you had any experience in that matter?
No, because cryptographers of generation before me won.
Okay, nice.
Now they won for now, but they won reasonably well, and it was accepted that the internet should have privacy.
That's great. And back in El Salvador, we chatted in the Plan B conference. We had some drinks, I remember, and we were in the Adam Back party in a bar. I don't remember the bar, but we were chatting about running Bitcoin nodes in satellites. It was a crazy conversation. I remember. But you were talking with Adam. It was you involved SpaceX in the conversation. I remember. But you remember that? It was back in...
Vaguely. I mean, running Bitcoin nodes and satellites is an idea that people keep on bringing up, and it's not very smart. Like, it just doesn't make that much sense.
I remember that just to make sure Bitcoin survive, something happens down here.
Yeah, but I mean, we're the ones down here. If Bitcoin doesn't survive down here because something happened down here and it wipes up all the Bitcoin nodes, I don't care if some satellite has copied the Bitcoin chain.
We need to take...
Like, it would be a nice memorial to all of humanity. But, maybe like rather than just having a satellite, maybe like launch it out in interstellar space so some aliens can pick it up later.
Exactly.
Intergalactic Bitcoin.
Yeah, to the next generations. We need to talk to Elon Musk in that matter and see how it goes. But Peter, it was a great conversation, great chat. Thank you very much for being here. I don't know if you have more questions.
From my side, it's a pleasure. Honestly, I think you're an icon, a role model for all cryptographers, all crypto.
I'm a terrible role model. All cryptographers used to go on podcasts all the time, don't write code. It's a terrible role model.
No, but what you preach, you're an icon. That's the point. Thank you for coming out to Costa Rica. It's exciting. You know, we're trying to build a movement here, building community, pushing new technologies, new concepts. So it's truly an honor to have you here, and thank you for supporting the movement for sure.
Last question. Will ever be another or Money Electric 2?
You know, there's a chance. But I'm not going to say what it is. You might find out in maybe a year or two. We'll see.
Shit.
Exciting.
All right. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.